The walls of the alien facility were alive with a low hum, like the steady breathing of some sleeping beast. Deep within the cold heart of that massive black station, orbiting a dead star in a forgotten corner of the galaxy, something stirred. On the metal table, the room was filled with green-blue light, glowing from strange instruments and liquid-filled tubes. But the thing that drew every eye in the room wasn't a machine. It was the body of a man chained, unconscious, and breathing slow like a sleeping predator. Mason Briggs didn't know where he was. His last memory was Earth, a dark sky, a simple mission, then light, blinding white light. Now, even in unconsciousness, something inside him resisted. The alien machine scanned his mind, but they didn't understand what they saw. The scientists, tall, thin beings with no mouths and bright violet eyes, circled him carefully. Their long fingers didn't touch him, not yet. They called him the final subject, the last test before their ultimate weapon would be unleashed upon the galaxy. A weapon they believed would end all war, not by killing bodies, but by destroying the mind. They called it the Mind Splinter. It was not meant to leave scars or burns. It was not meant to be seen at all. It attacked the mind like a ghost, splitting thoughts apart, turning soldiers into cowards, generals into fools, an entire species into husks of what they once were. The weapon had worked on every species they tested, except one. The humans. Too unpredictable, too unstable, too emotional. That's why they chose Mason. He was a soldier, a fighter. Someone they believed could be broken from the inside out. They wanted to break him while he was awake. The head scientist leaned forward. Begin phase 0. Alarms clicked. Fluid drained. Mason's eyes snapped open, bright, sharp, full of fury and confusion. He tried to move, but the steel cuffs held his wrists and ankles down. The cold metal bit into his skin. For a moment. He didn't scream, he didn't panic, he just stared at them. That was the first sign something was wrong. Most subjects began shaking or crying. Others begged. Some screamed until their hearts stopped. Mason only watched, eyes tracking. Every movement, breathing slow, like he'd been through worse, the aliens noticed. They whispered in their language, a sound like grinding stone and wind, and turned dials. The machine above Mason's head came to life. Needles unfolded. Energy began to pulse through coils. The splinter was activating. It would reach in too. His memories, his pain, his shame, and twist it all. Make him forget who he was. Make him something soft. Harmless, the first wave hit. Mason's back arched, his teeth clenched. But instead of collapsing, his mind pushed back. Old memories rushed forward. War zones, lost friends, fire and blood. They thought they were breaking him, but they were waking something up, a darker version of him buried deep under years of training and trauma. His heart didn't race. It slowed. His pupils narrowed like a wolf's. The alien monitors began blinking red. Subject brain activity increasing, one technician hissed. Cognitive centers, not breaking, strengthening. The leader stepped forward, confused, impossible. Mason began to speak, not in fear, not in confusion, but with control. Where am I? His voice was rough but steady. No response, I said. Where am I? Louder now, more dangerous. The lead scientist gestured. More power surged into the machine. The splinter dove deeper into Mason's mind, but instead of destroying, it found walls. Strange, shifting walls of memory and instinct. And at the center, something the aliens couldn't understand, human rage. Not random violence, not blind fury, but focused, sharp anger that had survived loss, betrayal, war, and still burned. Mason smiled, even as pain ripped through his skull. You're in trouble, he muttered, more to himself than them. The machine sparked. One exploded. The lights flickered. The lead scientist backed away. He's overriding. The interface shut it down. Someone screamed, but it was too late. Mason wasn't just surviving. He was absorbing, learning, adapting. His mind wasn't breaking. It was expanding. The weapon was designed to destroy minds, but the human brain was too wild, too chaotic, too alive. The splinter had entered the wrong battlefield. The power failed for 3 seconds. When the lights returned, Mason was still chained, but now smiling. "You wanted to see what happens when your weapon meets a human?" he said, voice calm. "Now it's my turn." The lead scientist finally felt something he had never known. Not confusion, fear. And that was the moment. They realized the test had failed. But the real problem? The subject hadn't. The silence after the test was the kind that made even machines seem afraid. The alien scientists didn't speak. Their glowing instruments pulsed nervously, blinking out error after error in their strange written language. Mason Briggs sat there, still strapped to the table. But something about him was different. His body hadn't changed, not visibly. But behind those calm, cold eyes, something had awakened, something they hadn't expected, something they couldn't control. The lead scientist, Commander Varex, stood motionless. He'd overseen the destruction of entire species. He had watched warriors scream as the splinters shattered their thoughts like glass. But this human had not only survived, he had taken in the weapon's full force, and smiled. That smile haunted Varex. It didn't belong on a broken mind. It belonged on a predator just before the kill. "Restrain the mind further," Varex commanded. "Lock down all neural access. Begin deep override." But the moment a technician touched the console, sparks flew out. The interface screamed with corrupted signals. Splinter was no longer responding to commands. Sella Mason had reversed the connection. The weapon was now syncing to him, not the other way around. Inside Mason's mind, chaos had formed a new kind of order. The pain was still there, burning through his brain like wildfire, but he didn't run from it. He welcomed it. The splinter had tried to dig up his deepest fears, but Mason had already faced worse. War had shown him the worst sides of humanity, betrayal, loss, blood, and endless silence after the screams. And now, instead of shattering, his mind wrapped around the pain, fed on it. It grew sharper. He wasn't just remembering things. He was seeing patterns, could feel the rhythm of the alien tech. He could hear the pulse of the energy fields around him. Senses were expanding, stretching beyond what any human should have been able to detect. He began to hear whispers. Not from the aliens, but from the weapon itself. Like it was alive, or becoming alive. Through him, one of the younger alien assistants backed away in panic. "It's changing him," Varex growled. "He's changing it." Then, Mason spoke again, not with rage, not with fear, but curiosity. "You call this a weapon?" he asked softly. "It's a mirror." Varex stepped forward, hiding his unease. "You are a test subject, a malfunction. This will end now." Mason tilted his head, almost amused. "You don't understand. What you've built, you thought it would break minds. But minds like mine, they don't break. They evolve." With a sudden impossible move, Mason leaned forward. The metal straps should have held him still. They had crushed stronger beings, but they cracked like old wood. He wasn't using brute strength. He was syncing his nervous system with the alien restraints, reading their structure, finding the weaknesses. He wasn't escaping, he was outthinking them. Alarms rang again. Lights turned red. Guards entered, large armored beings with weapons built for war. Mason didn't even look at them. He closed his eyes and everything went quiet for a heartbeat. Then the guards dropped their weapons, not by choice. Each one clutched their head, screaming. The splinter's signal, now pulsing from Mason's altered brain, reached into theirs not to destroy, but to confuse. Their instincts collapsed. Fight became fear. Purpose became doubt. Didn't even know who they were anymore. Some collapsed. Others ran. Varex turned in horror. Seal the chamber. But it was already too late. Mason stood now, the chains broken, his skin bruised, but his posture calm. He looked around, studying everything. His mind was burning. Every second, like a hurricane of thoughts and memories. But deep inside, a new center had formed. Calm, dangerous focus. He took a step toward the nearest console. One of the assistants moved to block him, and then froze mid-step, blood pouring from her nose. Her thoughts had short-circuited just by being too close to him. The splinter wasn't just inside Mason, it was now amplifying him. "I'm not just human anymore," he whispered to the dark ceiling. "You made something new." Varric ordered evacuation, shut it down. At the chamber, the ceiling hissed as gas began to pour in, a deadly mix designed to kill anything with lungs. But Mason didn't move. His body trembled, then settled. He had seen enough death to stop fearing it, and whatever was inside him now wasn't afraid either. The gas sensors failed, the cameras cut out, and the last thing Varric saw, before the room went dark, was Mason, eyes glowing faintly, staring straight into the lens. Not with hate, with purpose. They had built a weapon to destroy the mind. Instead, they had awakened a mind that could destroy worlds, and now it was loose. The blackout didn't last long, maybe 7 seconds. But for the alien research base orbiting the dying star, that was 7 seconds too many. In that time, every sensor, every control system, every defensive protocol had gone silent. The power flickered back on. The holding chamber was empty. The human Mason Briggs was gone. Now the chains that had once held him were melted, not broken. Melted. And in the center of the chamber, carved into the console metal was some kind of heat or energy blast, was a single word written in English. Wrong. The station's command staff tried to contain the situation. Doors were sealed. Troops were mobilized. AI surveillance units were deployed, but none of them knew where he had gone. He had disappeared like smoke. Not a single camera caught him. Moving no doors showed signs of forced entry. It was as if he had simply vanished into the walls. But the truth was much worse. He hadn't vanished. It evolved. Deep inside the mechanical skeleton of the research station, Mason was awake. Alert, and no longer just human. He moved between systems with ease, crawling through shafts, bypassing biometric scans, using nothing but instinct and something else. The splinter had embedded itself inside his nervous system, not as a virus, not as a parasite, but as a new kind of intelligence, a second mind merged with his own. At first it was just a feeling, then it became something more. He could feel waves of sound coming through the walls, hear the energy pulses in the wires. He could even sense emotion terror, mostly bleeding from the alien minds around him like heat from a fire. He didn't want to kill them. Not yet. He wanted to understand what they'd done. Why they chose him. Why they built something so horrible and thought they could aim it at the rest of the galaxy. But the deeper he went into the station's heart, the more he realized they weren't scientists trying to end war. They were conquerors preparing the final weapon. He had been the test that was never meant to return. In the control room, Commander Varric watched a map of the station. Dozens of red dots as troops spread through the corridors, sweeping section by section. One by one, the red dots began blinking out. No gunfire. No explosions. Just silence. They would enter a hallway and vanish. The control systems recorded nothing. No life signs. No energy discharge. Just cold, empty failure. We have a breach. In Power Sector Gamma, one officer barked. Now Delta. I'll beta he's in all three. That's impossible, Varric growled. He can't be everywhere at once. But he was wrong. Mason wasn't moving like a soldier anymore. He was moving like a signal, like a thought. His mind, merged with the splinter, was no longer limited by time or speed. He could sense and predict movement. He was rewriting the station's systems as he went. And when he reached the primary power core, he stopped and stared in front of him stood a single armored figure. Tall, gray, armored in layered organic metal. Its hands crackled with energy. A special unit. It's not a scientist, not a guard. A true warrior bred to kill anything that moved. Return to containment, the creature growled, or be ended. Mason didn't speak. He didn't run. He stepped forward. The creature attacked. Fast, efficient. Its arms lashed out like whips, its armor deflecting bullets, lasers, and plasma. But Mason didn't use weapons. He used thought. One flick of his hand, and the warrior stopped moving. Its armor locked up its legs refused to respond. Its mind flooded with images from Mason's head. War, pain, fire. Things the splinter had once tried to erase, now used like blades. The warrior dropped to its knees, and Mason leaned in close. "You built your weapon to destroy minds," he whispered. "But you forgot what happens when the mind fights back." The warrior screamed then went still. Mason stood, face calm, chest rising slow. The station's walls groaned. Systems flickered. He was done hiding. Done running. He walked to the nearest escape shuttle, broke the lock with a touch of his hand, and climbed in. Back in the command center, alarms screamed. "Launch bay breach." Someone shouted. Virex froze. No, he can't. But the screen showed. It clear one small ship launched, heading straight toward the outer moons. He was gone, and worse. He had taken the core of the splinter with him. It was now alive inside him, feeding, growing, adapting. The weapon that was meant to destroy human minds had become a part of one, and now was loose in the galaxy. The mining moon was quiet. Too quiet. Dust blew across its cracked surface in thin waves, dragged by artificial gravity fields and old weather systems that barely worked anymore. The ground was littered with rusted drills, dead rovers, and the bones of old machines long abandoned by their alien creators. But deep in the abandoned tunnels, where lights flickered and air recycled through grinding fans, something new had made its home. Mason Briggs didn't sleep anymore. Not really. Not since the splinter embedded itself into his nervous system and rewired what rest meant. His body still needed quiet, stillness, focus, but his mind never turned off. It was always scanning, calculating, listening. The walls around him weren't just rock and metal. They were signals. They spoke to him in whispers of static and heat, and he listened. I had turned the tunnels into a trap, not for survival. For war. The alien empire hadn't hesitated. The moment the shuttle vanished off their sensors, they dispatched a retrieval for Selite soldiers, bred for speed and brutality, the best killers in the empire. These weren't guards or drones. They were shadow units, genetically enhanced, trained to wipe out threats before those threats even knew they were hunted. But what they were walking into wasn't a man anymore. They came in 3 squads, each from a different direction. Drop pods slammed into the moon's surface, kicking up clouds of dust and static. The soldiers moved fast, fanning out, silent, confident. Their helmets scanned everything: heat, sound, life signatures. They had been promised an easy target. A lone escaped test subject, wounded, weak, broken. But they didn't find Mason. What they found was nothing. No heat. No tracks, no signs of movement. The lead squad's commander opened a channel. Area cold, proceeding underground. They entered the tunnels, weapons raised, lights cutting through the darkness. Still nothing. No breathing, no movement, no sign of the human, until the first scream echoed. It was short, high-pitched, then cut off. Squad 2 turned toward the sound. Their scanners picked up nothing. No enemy, no blood. Just one fewer life form, then another scream. Another gone, and then silence again. The team started to panic. He's using cloaking. One soldier snapped. Negative, another answered. Nothing's cloaked. There's no energy field, no distortion. Then where the hell is he? Mason watched them from the walls. Literally, he had tapped into the moon's ancient systems, linking his nervous system to the forgotten control grids. He could feel their footsteps through the vibrations in the metal. He could see their fear leaking into the air like smoke. The splinter had evolved in him, not as a virus, but as an extension of his will. He didn't need to touch them to break them. Could taste their thoughts from across the hall. It tasted sweet. He whispered into their helmets, hijacking their comes. You shouldn't have come. 3 of the soldiers ripped their helmets off, screaming. They fired wildly into the dark. The bullets ricocheted off old mining walls. No one was there, just shadows and fear. Mason moved like a ghost, fast, silent, inhuman. He let one soldier glimpse him, just a flash, a blur of movement. That was enough. The soldier dropped his weapon and ran, straight into a trap. A blast of sound inhuman frequencies that scrambled his brain like a signal burst hit him from hidden speakers. He collapsed, twitching, mouth foaming. Squad leaders screamed for extraction. Command refused. The operation had to continue. Mason was too dangerous to let go, but it wasn't Mason who was in danger. It was them. In less than 7 minutes, too. Squads were down. The third tried to escape, but every exit was sealed. Not physically, electronically. Mason had become part of the system. The doors obeyed him. The lights listened to him. Even gravity shifted when he wanted. The last soldier, the highest-ranking hunter, removed his helmet slowly. Sweat dripped from his alien brow. His eyes scanned the tunnel. "I know you can hear me," he said. "What do you want?" Mason stepped into view, not even trying to hide anymore. He looked calm, almost peaceful, but his eyes glowed faintly. Now not from tech, but from something deeper. Energy, intelligence, power. What I want, Mason said slowly, is to understand why your people build weapons like the Splinter. Why you use mines as your battlefield. The hunter stared. "We were told you would break, that you would scream, that you'd beg for death." Mason tilted his head. They didn't understand humans. Then, with a whisper of thought, he shut down the alien's armor locked at mid-step. The hunter froze. "You're not soldiers," Mason said, walking past him. "You're just machines waiting for the right virus." And he was that virus now. He reached the surface within minutes. The stars stretched above him, cold, vast, full. Of danger, he looked up toward the blackness. Eyes locked on the place he knew, Earth still hung. He wasn't running anymore. He had seen what the Splinter could do to the galaxy. Now it was time to show the galaxy what a human could do to the Splinter. The signal came in a burst of static, buried under layers of interference, like a voice screaming from the bottom of the ocean. Earth's deep space monitoring stations almost missed it. It wasn't strong. It wasn't clear. But the data logs caught a phrase hidden under alien encryption. Wrapped in non-human code, and one word in particular flickered through, burned into the screen in plain English. Mason. The room went silent. The technician who saw it first didn't understand. Mason Briggs had been marked KIA killed in action during a failed recon mission 6 months ago. His squad was ambushed near the outer colonies, and the bodies were never recovered. But now his name had just surfaced from a part of space Earth didn't even monitor, not because they couldn't, but because it didn't belong to them. It belonged to the Galactic Empire, and now Earth knew he was alive. Within hours, the data was forwarded to Earth Command. Within minutes of that, high-level military rooms in orbiting command ships were locked down. The United Earth Defense Fleet initiated Protocol Grey Echo A rescue operation so classified. Even the commanders involved needed temporary clearance to read the mission files. Mason wasn't just a missing soldier anymore. He was a liability, or a weapon. The data package also included distorted footage, fragments of alien surveillance. Glimpses of Mason inside a facility, far from Earth, strapped to a table, surrounded by alien tech, then standing free. 1 second he was restrained. The next, the chamber was dark. Screams followed. And after that, nothing but broken sensors. And silence. The few images that survived showed Mason looking directly into a camera with a calm, focused stare, his eyes glowing faintly. Something had happened to him. Earth scientists reviewed the files in horror. They didn't recognize the tech in the background. But one phrase repeated again and again in the intercepted alien logs. The Splinter. A mind weapon. Psychological warfare beyond anything Earth had seen. But it hadn't worked. It's not on Mason. Somehow it had fused with him, changed him. And now, he wasn't hiding. He was calling home. Earth Command didn't hesitate. The response was immediate. It's not a press conference, not a diplomatic message, a ship, a special operations team. And at the heart of it, a general who knew Mason. Personally, Admiral Carter Lockwood. Back during the early expansion wars, Lockwood had watched Mason fight. He had seen what the man could do with just a combat knife and a broken leg. Mason had been built for impossible missions, trained to survive in chaos. But even Lockwood wasn't sure what kind of man they'd find now. That was the risk. Bring him back, Lockwood ordered the mission team. But if we can't bring him back, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The shuttle was launched in stealth mode. No announcement. No signal. They tracked the signature of the stolen alien vessel Mason had used to escape. It led them to a barren mining moon, nearly swallowed by dust and forgotten technology. But when the team landed, something unexpected happened. He was already waiting, no weapons in hand, just standing in the middle of the rocky plain. Alone, he watched the ship descend. No fear, no tension, like he had expected them all along. The team fanned out, unsure whether to raise their weapons. "Mason Briggs," the commander called out. Mason nodded once. "You're late." The team didn't respond. They didn't know how to approach what they were seeing. Mason looked human, sounded human, but there was something off. Not wrong, just different. The way he moved. The way his eyes scanned everything, the stillness of his body, was like his brain was running 10 steps ahead of his limbs. "I've got answers," he said, stepping closer. "And I've got warnings. Your war isn't coming. It already started." They took him aboard the ship. On the way back to Earth Command, Mason spoke with the general directly through a secure channel. He didn't waste time. "The splinter isn't a weapon," he said. It's a seed." Lockwood leaned forward. "Explain they plant it in minds. Let it grow. Doesn't destroy you. It rewrites you, breaks loyalty, corrupts identity. Whole civilizations could collapse without ever knowing they were under attack." "But it didn't break you," Lockwood said. "No," Mason replied, "because I was already broken. The human mind wasn't something they were ready for. Our chaos confused the system. So instead of destroying me, it joined me." Lockwood was silent for a long moment, and now, he asked, "What are you?" Mason didn't answer for several seconds. Then, and what comes next? Back on Earth, the data he brought was decrypted. Alien blueprints. Biological warfare. Psychological targeting systems. Plans to expand the Splinter Project and distribute it across known space. It wasn't just a tool. It was a plan. A galactic cleansing species by species and by mind. Earth finally understood what was coming, and they understood who had been. Turned into the first true defense. The Council voted unanimously. Earth would retaliate, but not with fear. With something far more dangerous. Human who survived the mind weapon and came back stronger. They thought he would come back broken. Instead, he came back building. When Mason Briggs returned from the mining moon, the Galactic Empire didn't see it happen. Earth had kept the operation quiet. Silent, surgical. No public broadcasts. No grand displays of power. Just one stolen alien shuttle returning to deep space under human control. And carrying something far more dangerous than explosives or weapons. It carried knowledge. And Mason, now back on Earth, Mason wasn't greeted like a hero? Not yet. Too many questions surrounded him. He was monitored, quarantined, studied, not out of cruelty, but fear. Earth scientists, soldiers, and leaders saw the glow in his eyes, strange flickers in his neural scans, the impossible way he could interface with alien machines just by touching them. He didn't speak much in those early days. He only observed, listened, waited, and then, one day, he asked for a room. Not a cell, not a lab. A room with tools, metal, circuits, screens. No. One knew what he was building, but they gave him what he asked for. And 2 weeks later, the first system activated. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. No lasers, no bombs, no virus. Just a pulse like a heartbeat spreading through human satellites and defense stations across Earth's sky. A signal Mason had designed. Based on the Splinter, but this one didn't destroy. Detected it found attempts. Traces of alien signals already creeping into human minds. Low-level interference, soft suggestions, emotional shifts. The splinter wasn't waiting for war. It was already here, slipping into civilian communications, advertisements, entertainment feeds. Quiet, invisible, unstoppable, until Mason's signal found it. Earth was shocked, furious, ready, and then Mason gave them more blueprints. Data stolen from the alien empire's own labs, designs for ships, armor, signal disruptors, and something else, a new kind of human tech, coded directly from Mason's altered brain, tech that could counter the splinter, scramble it, jam it before it took root. But Mason didn't stop there. He began recruiting not soldiers, survivors, people like him, veterans of war, people with trauma, pain, minds the splinter couldn't understand because they didn't follow clean patterns. Mason believed the key to defeating the weapon wasn't avoiding it, it was adapting to it, and soon Earth had its first shadow cell, a squad of human operatives trained to face the weapon in combat. Each of them underwent a mild, controlled exposure to the splinter's echo signal, just enough to force their minds to change, to twist, to harden. What came out the other side weren't normal humans. They were something new, something terrifying, something the aliens had never predicted. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, panic had begun to spread in the upper levels of the Galactic Empire. Commander Varex, the one who had overseen Mason's capture, had been stripped of rank and silenced. Even in disgrace, he whispered warnings. He is not alone anymore. His words were ignored. The Council believed Earth could be dealt with a backwater species, loud, violent, short-lived. But then, reports began arriving from other fringe systems. Ships failing, entire mind control. Networks collapsing, facilities hijacked without a single shot fired, and in the wreckage messages were carved into the walls in English. We remember. You built a weapon. Now it's yours. Fear spread through the Empire like infection. No matter what countermeasures they deployed, the pattern was clear. The splinter was no longer under their control. The signal had changed. It had grown, evolved, and worst of all, it was spreading through systems that had never even touched Earth. Somewhere in the shadows of deep space, the weapon they had designed to erase civilizations was now moving on its own, whispering into systems, turning machines against their makers, not to destroy them instantly. No, to make them feel what it was like to be hunted by their own creation back on Earth. Admiral Lockwood stood with Mason as they watched a holographic projection of the known galaxy. Several red zones blinked where the splinter had once operated. Now they were dark, shut down, dead. Are we fighting a war? Lockwood asked quietly. No, Mason said, eyes never leaving the map. We're replacing one. With what? The Admiral asked. Mason's voice was quiet, steady, balance. The human fleet wasn't just preparing for battle anymore. They were preparing for something far more complex. Control, not with violence, not with conquest, but with influence, counter-influence. The same weapon the enemy had used, now turned back against them. And Earth wasn't alone. Other species had begun to notice. Some had lost people to the splinter. Others had resisted it for years without understanding how. Now they turned to Earth, not for help but for leadership, because Earth had done the unthinkable. They had taken the galaxy's deadliest weapon and made it human, and now that weapon wasn't hiding anymore. It was building an army. The galaxy had seen power before, planet-crushing fleets, starburners, mind-warpers. Empires rose and fell on technology designed to end species before they even fought back. But never in its long history had it seen something like this. Not a machine, not a virus, not a superweapon, a man. Mason Briggs stood aboard the Earth flagship Vigilance. No longer just a soldier, no longer even just human. Around him, the crew watched in silence as live holofeeds streamed from across the galaxy. Alien strongholds falling without fire, entire splinter networks shutting down mid-signal. Elite command ships simply powering down, unable to fight the infection they had created. But it wasn't a disease. It was him. What started as an experiment in a forgotten, alien lab had become a revolution, not just in warfare but in thought. The splinter had been designed to unravel minds, to quietly break resistance before a single weapon fired. But when they tested it on a human, they discovered too late. The human mind doesn't just resist, it remembers, it endures, it rebuilds, and now it retaliates. Across the stars, alien leaders begged for answers. Who was this man? How had Earth taken control of a weapon meant for domination? What force could twist fear into strength, and then weaponize that strength against its creators? But the truth was simple. They didn't break Mason Briggs. They woke him up. The Earth Alliance, once considered a minor voice in galactic politics, now stood at the center of everything. Messages flooded in from outer colonies, independent planets, rogue civilizations. Everyone wanted the same thing: protection, guidance, answers. They all wanted Earth's help, and Earth sent Mason. His first stop was the Central Command world of the former Splinter Network. The planet wasn't a battlefield. It was already lost to confusion, paranoia, collapse. The weapon that once whispered destruction now screamed back. At its creators, systems failed. Communication blacked out. Soldiers turned on each other. Commanders broke down, begging for thoughts that weren't nightmares. Mason didn't land with troops. He walked alone, and the moment his boots touched the steps of the enemy's capital tower, all resistance vanished. Not because they feared his weapons, but because they felt his mind, calm, focused, sharper than any of theirs. He didn't speak threats. He gave orders, and they obeyed. Because by then, even the enemy knew the human they once tried to destroy had become something else entirely. A force of will, a signal stronger than anything they'd built, a mirror they couldn't look away from. Back on Earth, the council met in secret. Some feared Mason's evolution. Some whispered that he wasn't human anymore, that he had become part machine, part weapon, part splinter. But Admiral Lockwood silenced them with a single question. Do you fear him? Or the part of him that still cares? Because despite everything, the pain, the experiments, the power, Mason had not lost himself. He hadn't become a monster. He hadn't turned into what the aliens feared most. He had become exactly what they needed. A guardian. A warning. A reminder that Earth, for all its flaws, produced something no empire had ever mastered: the refusal to kneel. Soon, treaties were rewritten. Fleets were recalled. The galaxy shifted, not through war, but through weight. The weight of human will. The weight of a man who had walked through hell and brought the fire back with him. Mason stood one last time in front of the Galactic Council, the same empire that once tried to erase him. Alien leaders lowered their heads, not out of fear, but out of understanding. The Splinter had taught them that control over the mind was power, but Mason had shown them something greater, that the mind could fight back, that even one soul wounded, tortured alone could rise, evolve, and bring down an empire. He stepped forward, his voice low, clear, and final. I'm not your weapon. I'm your lesson. And with that, the galaxy changed. No more hidden control. No more quiet wars. No more experiments on the minds of the innocent. Because they had tried to break a human, and now they served under one. The stars were quiet again. The war, if it could even be called that, was over. It's not with the thunder of battleships or the collapse of planets, but with something stranger, something more permanent. The Splinter Network, once the silent empire-spanning weapon that ruled with whispers and fear, was gone. Disconnected, dismantled, not by a fleet, not by a vote, by one man, by Mason Briggs. He had vanished after the council bowed. After the Empire surrendered control and Earth's influence spread across a dozen sectors, Mason simply left. No speech, no final mission, no orders, just a message. Short and cryptic. My part is done. Now it's yours. And he was gone. No shuttle logs, no trackers, No signal, just gone. Some said he returned to Earth, hiding among the mountains. Others believed he left for the outer edge of the galaxy, where signals don't reach and silence still reigns. A few whispered he ascended into the splinter itself, now not just a weapon or system, but something more, living and reshaped by Mason's will. Wherever he went, he left behind something far more powerful than himself, a story, across planets. Once enslaved by fear, his name became more than a warning, it became hope. A symbol. Refugees painted his face on broken walls. Resistance groups took his name as their banner. Even enemy soldiers, now freed from splinter influence, spoke of him with strange reverence. They remembered the man who walked into their empire alone and walked out with their minds unshackled. On Earth, statues were rejected. Mason wouldn't have wanted them. Instead, a single beacon was built on the moon's surface, where the stars were always visible. Not a monument, a signal post. It broadcasted one phrase over and over in every known galactic language. The mind is not a battlefield. It is a blade. That message reached deep space. It reached broken colonies. It reached species still hiding in fear. I'm sure if they could resist the splinter's return, and it told them the truth. They already could, because someone had done it. And he hadn't just survived, he'd beaten it. Years passed. And still, stories grew. Some said Mason had founded a hidden group, deep in the dark. Systems training new minds to resist any future version of the splinter. A hidden order, not of warriors, but of thinkers. Walkers in shadow. Human and alien alike. Others claimed he had never existed at all, that he was just a myth, crafted by Earth propaganda to shake the Empire. But the truth was simpler. He had existed, he had bled, he had burned, and he had changed everything. Even the Galactic Council, now operating under new rules Mason had forced into being, kept a single seat empty in their chamber. A quiet chair, polished steel, facing the center of the hall. No one spoke about it. No one sat in it. But everyone knew it was his, not out of ceremony, out of fear that if he ever returned, he'd come with no warning, no army, just a quiet question. What? Have you done with the freedom I gave you? So the council made sure they stayed clean? So Earth stayed watched, not as a threat, but as a reminder, because what they had done to one man could never be done again, in the end. Mason Briggs didn't become emperor, didn't rule, didn't even return, but his name lingered. Passed from mind to mind, planet to planet, whispered like a prayer and a warning both. A warning that no weapon, no system, no empire could truly control the human mind, because they tested their greatest invention on a man, and he gave it back to them as a legend.